wonderful mezzo-soprano and personal friend now, Wallis Giunta. Wally has sung everywhere. And we got to know each other about this time last year, or maybe a little bit earlier. We sang together at the Edinburgh Festival in a wonderful opera called Breaking the Waves, which we performed together in Edinburgh and then again in Adelaide, just before the world fell apart. And we were supposed to go on in June to perform it with the orchestra of the Metropolitan Opera at the Brooklyn Academy of Music in New York, but unfortunately it was not meant to be. But
my last show, was that your last show in Adelaide?
it was the last one yeah, absolutely.
You were going to go on to Italy and do another thing, but you couldn't, right?
Yeah, I basically had to change my flights while for that week we were in Adelaide. Just so people know, so we were in Adelaide for a week at the Adelaide Festival in March, and basically having a sort of weird mix of having an amazing time, because we really did have a lot of fun with that cast.
We had the shows and full houses, and the festival was awesome.
Yeah,
But
beautiful weather and all of that.
yeah.
But we were sort of glued to our phones, getting kind of every couple of hours updates about what was going on with COVID and
are we going to get home?
If we were going to get home. I mean, we were told to keep our phones on ringer from the company, particularly in the last couple of days, because they were really watching it to see if they just needed for us to pack it in and just go to the airport. So it was so unbelievably stressful, actually, looking at it retrospectively.
It was surreal, very much. I remember feeling torn between wanting to enjoy myself and this amazing experience and worrying about being stuck in the Southern Hemisphere for the next 6 months and not being able to get home.
Yeah. Do you know,
anything, you know?
I did have a thought of if I were 10 years younger, and didn't have responsibilities. I had at the time a wife, a pregnant wife, and now I have a wife and a daughter. If I didn't have responsibilities, I might have just stayed. I might have just stayed.
You're from there, so it's not as bad.
Yeah.
For you, it's like, oh, I'll just go, be home for a bit. But I was like, wow, this will be I wasn't necessarily afraid of the opportunity, but it would have been a wild thing to be stuck in Australia for the whole quarantine, But
just so you know, I formulated a foolproof backup plan. Okay. When we went and had this amazing meal on the beach, sort of in the Adelaide countryside. Do you remember?
Yes.
Stuart, yeah.
Greece.
Yes, the Star of Greece. Shout out to the Star of Greece. One of the best meals I've ever had in my life. Beautiful restaurant on the beach in Adelaide countryside. And as we were driving back, I saw all these isolated houses. And I thought, okay, if we get stuck, we're going to rent one of these houses and we're all just going to have a beach party for the next couple of weeks. And we'll be safe. We'll have
weeks, eh?
Yeah.
Just a couple of weeks.
Just a few weeks.
Cue August. Okay, sick of the beach now. I got back 2 days before lockdown in the UK.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think I still would have been able to enter the country even if I'd gotten back after, because they weren't restricting entry requirements. But it was a very different place once the lockdown happened. I mean, you were there too, so.
Yeah. And you were in Leeds for the majority of it?
I got back to Leeds. Yeah.
Okay. And where are you now? What's kind of going on? What's your current situation?
So my partner, Alex Banfield, he just started an ensemble position in the Opera House in Basel, Switzerland. He's one of the lucky ones who's not only working right now, but starting a new job.
That's fantastic. I'll go, Alex. Wow.
Yeah, so we are living on the French side of the border in a small town like 15 minutes from the city, because Basel's right on the border of Switzerland and France. So we're technically in a little French village, but we sort of are in Switzerland, if you know what I mean.
What an amazing... So, and is this where Alex is going to be based for the foreseeable future?
he's here for one season, so until next June. And I'm not officially moving here, but I'm going to be going back and forth and spending as much time as I can with him. A lot more than I would have been able to because I don't have any work. So
Yeah, you both, right?
but
Yeah.
as projects come up, if projects come up, I have a couple recording things. I'll be like going and doing things and coming back. But we've kept our place in Leeds, and I've also been in Canada for a while. I just got back from Canada a day and a half ago.
And was that for work purposes or family?
Just being home.
Nice.
Yeah, I
Must have been
spent
lovely. It's therapeutic, no?
really therapeutic. It was tough because I had to quarantine for the first 2 weeks, and
Oh,
my mother, she's prepared the basement for me, and I just sort of stayed down there, and
you
then
were
I
like a
had
little basement troll for 2 weeks.
yeah, but I was outside and stuff, and then I had 5 days at the end where I busted free, and I got to leave the house and see people,
So
from a
wait,
distance.
can you just, sorry, I realize we're here to talk about nutrition, but this is really interesting to me. So can you just describe briefly those two geeks living in the basement? Were you, sorry, that sounded my dog drinking water at my feet. There's not some weird stuff going on. He's just decided to come. Terry, hey buddy, do you want to see him? Have you met my dog?
I haven't met him, but I've seen a lot of photographs. And oh, hi there, beautiful boy.
You can
You're
see
the
him.
best.
He's a he's a good boy, really. He's great with the baby, which is
Oh,
awesome. Which is awesome. Sorry, talk me through it.
I was really lucky. My parents' basement is a separate apartment, so it's actually quite nice. It's not just like a basement with like.
So that was quite an undersell. I was sort of imagining these like broken stairway down to like a dingy sort of flooded basement, and you're like in the
No, no,
corner.
no. It's actually really nice. Like when we built our house when I was in high school, like my dad designed it. We built it as a family, and he conceived of the basement being like a fully livable area right from day one. And then a few years ago, he converted it to a separate apartment so they can rent it out to tenants. But at the moment, they didn't have one, so it was mine. So it was like mostly my mom bringing me, meals down the stairs and standing at the top and me at the bottom, and we were chatting. And um, I got some work done on my taxes and
Oh god.
you know, did some video editing. I saw people in the backyard. It was okay. It was really nice actually. Very relaxing.
Quite surreal to like what would your mum leave a plate of food at like the top of the stairs and you'd have to
Well, no, like she'd bring it like down and then I'd come and get it. And like she didn't just leave it at the top.
knock, do the secret knock and then run away.
Well, she did a bit of that. Yeah, there's definitely some knock and runs.
Anyway, talking about food, what we're here for
Yep.
um, is we're having breakfast together.
Yep.
And I just thought, yeah. Oh, yours looks so much better than mine. Now I can't show mine. Look at that. Okay, I'll do mine. Just
Allow me to put on the pièce de résistance here, the sriracha, which I love for many reasons. Not only the flavor, but the colorful flair of
you're like
how
an
it looks.
artist with it.
Yeah. Well, there's something really cool about avocado with sriracha. Like just the color, I like it.
So we have got. Look, I'll show you my sad little plate of food compared to Wally. But I've got
Oh,
three
that looks good.
Burford brown eggs. I've got some wholemeal sourdough toast from the bakery around the corner, and some avocado. And I put some little bit of salt and lime juice on there. Unfortunately, I don't have any sriracha.
Here, you can have some
Thank
from
you.
here.
Thank you. Yes. So talk me through this meal. Does this sort of represent like something you'd eat quite regularly in the morning?
Yes, this is one of my favorite meals. Fresh ground pepper.
Thank you. Thank you. Too
Uh,
generous.
yeah, I eat this a lot. In some variation of this, I my approach to food is perhaps a little unorthodox, but I'm kind of, with exceptions, I'm generally interested in the simplest meals that I can come up with that are both, really flavorful and interesting and good for me, packing all the punches that they need. But I'm not really much of a cook. I can cook, and when there's company or an event or, a special dinner, I can put on a good thing. I can do a nice meal. But my instinct is not to cook for every meal. My instinct is to go for what can I make in 10 minutes that's fresh and nutritious and really good. So I often lean towards stuff like this. This is one of my faves because I can make it in under 10 minutes. It's got lots of protein, healthy fats. I'm using also like a multi-grain sourdough from the French bakery across the street, Primo. Um, yeah, and carbs and everything. And I guess the sriracha just makes it super tasty. So yeah, this is like probably top five for me.
Like a standard go-to. That sounds like a really good tactic, particularly for someone who travels as much as you do. Is sort of what can I throw together that's relatively simple? Because often, particularly if we are doing a short contract like the one we did together in Adelaide, you
Yeah.
don't necessarily have access to much by way of cooking facilities.
Oh, we had nothing there, right?
Yeah, actually, we had nothing there, didn't we?
But we did have a really kick-ass breakfast buffet.
Oh, I
That,
remember that.
that was amazing. Like, when have you had brie and walnuts on a hotel breakfast buffet?
Yeah, and those that vegetable juicer was
Yeah,
phenomenal.
and a whole thing of honeycomb that you could just take fresh honey
Yeah.
off of. It
I
was
wonder if that might be the most sort of lavish, not necessarily lavish, but in terms of variety, the most variety I've ever had in a.
it was steamed broccoli with sesame oil
Yeah.
every day at breakfast.
We suddenly got all these Scottish people broccoli for breakfast, which I think is quite an achievement.
I was having it every day.
Mm.
I was really into the broccoli. Like I was like, oh, I could have breakfast food, but there's this really good steamed broccoli and honeycomb and a cheese board. So maybe I'll just have that.
Just go for that. It's this is just for everyone watching, listening. This is at the Intercontinental Hotel in Adelaide Central, where they put us up when we were singing together um,
Mm-hmm.
for the Adelaide Festival. Yeah, just a wonderful experience.
If you're
Um,
looking for somewhere to stay, it's worth it for the
yeah,
buffet.
I definitely recommend it. So obviously, a couple of things about this meal is there's eggs, but you are in general a vegetarian.
Yes.
Can you talk to me about that? How long have you been following that eating pattern? Have
Mm-hmm.
you tried any other? Have you been vegan or things like that? Can you talk me through that?
For sure. I've been vegetarian since I was born. My parents are veggie. They became vegetarian in their early 20s and then raised my sister and brother and I as veggie. So I didn't make the choice to be, but I grew up, in the 80s and 90s eating tofu and seaweed and flaxseed oil supplements and all kinds of weird shit. I'd go to school with my pack lunch and let's just say nobody wanted to trade with me. But
You probably had the healthiest lunchbox, but it was for a child probably the saddest looking lunchbox. There were no Snickers bars or.
no, 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 no. It was like, unroasted, unsalted peanut butter, raw peanuts with on like whole wheat bread with no jam and apples and cucumbers, and it was great. It was really healthy. But I looked over and my friends had like grape juice and fruit roll-ups and whatever cheese strings and all this processed food that a lot of kids eat,
Uh-huh.
like pudding cups and all that stuff. I don't know if you know
A,
what some
a
of these
what?
things are.
A pudding cup.
This is a distinctly North American food
Okay.
things you might not have had in Australia, but a pudding cup. So I don't mean pudding like the British dessert. I mean like the kind of yogurt like.
It's a sort of like moussey,
Uh-huh.
sloppy chocolate or some flavored
Yep.
thing you eat with a spoon. Yes, yes, of course. Yeah, I'm
And the yogurt.
familiar.
Those were big. There were different flavors, and most kids had one of those in their lunchbox. And they're just like, chocolate flavored gelatin. It's horrible, but I looked on it with envy while I ate my steamed broccoli, you know? So, yeah, being vegetarian was just what I knew. And then throughout my life, like growing up, I stuck with it. We were actually for a while, when I was a kid, we were vegan. We were even gluten free.
Oh,
for
wow.
a while. So,
How
my
long
mom,
did you follow a sort of vegan eating?
for several years, probably, I think in my early teens, my mom had us go vegan. So we cut out all, we never actually drank milk, even growing up. Like from the get go, it was soy milk or almond milk or something else.
And that must have been in that, because are we the same age, Wally?
I'm 34.
Okay, so I'm sorry to drag you into my twilight years. I'm 36.
Oh my
Um,
God.
but certainly the same sort of era.
Yeah,
Um,
it was
that must
cutting
have
it.
been difficult to source almond milk in the 80s, or did your mum have like the hookup? She'd meet a guy behind a parking lot.
Well, she did learn how to make it herself. I think the almond milk came later, like maybe when I was in my teens, so late 90s kind of thing.
Okay.
When I was a kid, it was soy milk for sure. Um, yeah, but she got really creative. We had a Vitamixer. Do you know what those are?
Like a
There's,
like a NutriBullet?
it's a big industrial strength food processor. Like it can turn a block of wood into sawdust kind of thing. They were really cutting edge at the time, but she could make her own like nut milk with that. And
Wow.
yeah, so they were really into the health stuff. Like we got that thing because people were starting to get into juicing, but my parents were on the cutting edge of that going, well, yeah, fruit and veg are great, but you're better off eating the fiber,
Yep.
like why throw it away? Because that's the healthy part. So
Yeah.
we'll put the whole thing in there and we'll blend it up and you'll drink all of it.
And I'm really curious, because obviously this is sort of music to my ears, all these things you're saying, but this is obviously a fairly atypical
Oh yeah.
sort of nutritional food experience as a child. Do you have any experiences or recollections of times when you tried, like, I don't know, a can of Coke or a pudding cup or a cheese string, and what it sort of tasted like, or did it have some sort of impact on you?
So that we didn't eat sugar. That's the other thing.
Wow.
Like hardcore no sugar. At Easter, my mom would get us like carob eggs instead of chocolate. Do you know what I mean?
Wow.
The
Okay.
carob isn't really that yummy. It's sort of it looks like chocolate, but it doesn't taste like it.
No, I've had it. It's I wouldn't recommend it.
No,
Yeah.
but I see what she was doing, and I respect that. Um, and for birthdays, she'd make us like a cake with applesauce that didn't have any sugar in it, and like a whole wheat applesauce cake, and it was it was delightful. And at the time, I was just so upset about everything because I knew what other kids were getting. You
Oh,
know,
okay. So there was a sort of, you did recognize that what you were
yeah,
experiencing was not what everyone else was.
it
Okay.
was not, no, like especially on Halloween. Um, that
So
was the
you didn't get, Halloween, all right, go nuts, have you Reese's peanut butter.
no. My mom was really smart. She'd take the bag when we got home, and then she'd give us like she'd take out all the crap candy, like the stuff that was just really not worth it. She'd let us keep the crisps, the chips,
Okay.
um, some of the better chocolate bars, and if anyone had given us an apple, obviously that was in. And then she'd throw away the stuff that was kind of like just transmogrified petroleum products,
So like 95, yeah, so like 95%.
Yeah, and then she'd sort of ration it out over a period of months, in small doses. So,
That sounds wise.
well, it was for sure because she taught us, and not only did she it wasn't like she just confiscated the candy and was like, screw you. She explained why. She gave us things to read about what sugar does to your body, how it acts as a toxin and a poison, and we were fully aware. And dairy too. We didn't eat a lot of dairy, and we were talking as kids with our parents about how it's strange for humans to consume animal dairy. That it's designed for a creature with four
For a baby
stomachs,
stuff. Yeah, yeah.
for a baby, as a complete food. And why do we drink milk? And obviously, they're not like hardcore strict about that, but they wanted us to be aware of all the things to consider. So your question of what was it like to try some of these forbidden fruits as a kid, mixed results.
Okay.
I really wasn't actually that turned on by like highly processed crap stuff. I did have Coke, I think probably at a birthday party. Didn't like it. Never have liked it. I remember one time we were out with another family on a boat, like picnic day, and the mom had brought, do you know what Wonder Bread is?
Yes, yes.
Um, she'd brought Wonder Bread sandwiches with like Cheese Whiz, which
Oh,
is like a
yeah.
processed cheese spreadable product,
It's
which
like
I don't,
edible food-like product.
yeah, there was no dairy in that. So
Yeah.
she gave me this Wonder Bread and Cheese Whiz sandwich, and I guess I was like 6 or 7. I took a bite and I just vomed over the side of the boat.
No, you're kidding.
Yeah, couldn't do it.
Instantly, like your body almost what treated it like it was a poison or something.
Yeah, I think it was more psychological. But it was just like, this is gross. No, thank you.
That
Um,
that's amazing because one thing that I have that surprised me now in my time working as a nutritionist is how significantly I'd sort of read about it before, but now I've actually seen it many times. How significantly people can influence their taste receptors. You can wean yourself off
yep.
enjoying these ultra sugary things.
Oh, yeah.
And what I suspect may have been the case with you as a kid is that since you weren't used to drinking cans of Coke or eating all this candy, it, it may have tasted actually gross to you because your palate was sensitized to a certain amount of sugar. And this would have been like 4, 5, 6 times the amount that you were able to handle.
I don't think it tasted to me like food. I think I felt like I was eating something that wasn't food.
Huh.
Because we were really like whole foods, all natural, no processed. Like we were really good. Like no crap, anything, nothing processed at all. But I definitely had a taste for like baked goods. I loved pie. Like my grandma makes fantastic pie. Both my grandmothers actually make really amazing baked goods. So
And when you
homemade
say pie,
goods,
are you talking about like an apple pie?
yeah, apple pie, like something, a sweet pie. So obviously I didn't like processed stuff, and I still don't. Like I'd never go and like buy a Mars bar. Just never gonna happen. I will get some like quality pure chocolate for sure, but um, when it comes to like homemade baked goods, we never had that at home growing up, really, except for the birthday applesauce cake. And so if I went to someone's house and they had made like a pie or a cake or cookies or something, I'd eat like 45 of them because it was like Christmas come early, you know?
Yeah, okay. Okay.
So I did struggle a bit with self-restraint when it came to treats that I liked that we weren't allowed.
So
Um,
you sort of recognize them as a little naughty. So you're like, oh, I'm not going to get this for another whatever month or something till the
mhm.
next birthday party. So I'm going to stock up.
Yeah, but if it was like a weird, crappy processed cake, I wouldn't want it. But if it was like a homemade, nice thing, I'd want to take the whole thing into the bathroom and eat it, you know?
Wow. Okay, that's really interesting. So you sort of what I'm hearing from you is a real distinction between you're really not talking about things like so much about like calories or fat content or whatever. You're talking about processed versus unprocessed foods. This seems to be where the real distinction lies in your.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's still the case for me. Like when I want a snack, I'd much rather go for like half a cucumber and or like, peanut butter on toast than buy a bag of crisps or something like in a, colorful package.
I remember, and this is one of the reasons I do want to talk about specifically in a moment about, what you eat on show days and things like that. But since we're on this vein now, one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation with you is because it was really interesting to observe. I noticed this about you when we were working together. I hope I'm not treating you like, it's not like I was treating you like some experimental, like,
Oh,
you're some science experiment, but it was interesting to see.
I mean, this is what
Um,
you do, right? You.
Yeah, well, I do it anyway. Yeah, but one afternoon in rehearsals, I remember really distinctly. It was when Orla was still with us. I'm sure she wouldn't mind me telling this story. Obviously, we had Orla, the wonderful soprano Orla Boylan, with us in Edinburgh, but unfortunately, she had to leave the show for personal reasons. And we had a replacement, fantastic replacement, but then Orla came and joined us again when we did it in Adelaide. But we were rehearsing one afternoon and she was just looking at you. I said, what? Why are you staring at Wally? And she just goes, she's the healthiest looking person I've ever seen in my life. And I hadn't really put it like that. I hadn't imagined it in that way, but you really do sort of, how do I want to say it without sounding weird? You kind of radiate health in a way, which
I
is,
will give that to my mother. She'll be very happy to hear it.
yeah, a compliments to your mother and father, and the reason it's interesting to me is a couple of several fold. And well, the first is because we have very different experiences in terms of our relationship with food. You know, I don't want to focus on my experience. I'm more interested in yours, but you know, I grew up very much the opposite. And it's no criticism to my family or, you know, the circumstances led it to this. But, you know, after I lost my father when I was very young, when I was 7 years old. And no, thank you. Long time ago, gosh, almost 30 years ago. And my personal response was food. And so I was eating we didn't have cheese whiz and stuff in Australia, but, you know, mince pies and lamingtons and all, we call it the tuck shop that we had in school. You know, you go and have a couple of dollars and you'd get whatever, you know.
I know what
I was actually, as a child, very, very overweight. And so my relationship with food it seems quite different. That experience, I had to sort of learn as an adult about like healthy eating and all that kind of stuff. But the reason I bring that up is because what I notice with you is something that I try to foster in all of my clients, which is this sort of healthy, positive relationship with food. It's not about fearing things. It's not about looking at food like a bunch of macronutrients and calories on a plate, but sort of like going for the things that you know are going to make you healthful.
Yeah.
And you know, even the way you talk about processed food, you don't sort of talk about it like as a boogeyman. You just sort of recognize that it doesn't make you feel good.
It doesn't turn me on. It really doesn't. And there's a few exceptions, like, you know, I do like the occasional salty snack like a pretzel or something, but it's not what I default to. It's the exception, not the norm, you know?
Yeah.
Like if I'm at a bar and there's, you know, some sort of peanut pretzel mix on the counter, like it's not like I'd go, ooh, I won't eat that, you know?
Have a bit.
I'll have a bit, yeah. And I guess I just skew much more toward fresh and unprocessed food as much as possible. I'm way less strict personally than the way I grew up, and you know, even my parents have taken the reins off a bit. Like they will now. When we were growing up, there was no sugar at all. You know, like my mom had a thing of maple syrup, which is normal in Canada, but she'd keep it like locked away in the top cupboard. We didn't even have like sugar for baking because we didn't bake, and
I just
so
had this image. Sorry, I just had this image of like the Ark of the Covenant or something, like this thing of maple syrup in your kitchen, like on the top. You had to like go through the booby traps to get to it.
oh, you know, my
Had its
sister
own
had, like
style.
two little ginger climbers, like using all the chairs in the house to try and get to it. So my parents were not looking, with varying degrees of success. But like even now, my mom she'll buy a bar of dark chocolate, and after dinner she'll be like, "Want a square?" You know. So I'm like, "Whoa, mom, that's radical.
Oh, yeah.
Something that has sugar in it? What?" But I respect them so much. Like they were, as you said, way ahead of the curve. They were doing things in the 80s, 90s, and even 2000s that is even now considered like kind of a fringe health thing. You know, even to this day, when you can walk to the corner store and buy kombucha, my parents were like making their own ferments in the 90s.
Wow.
You
Well, that
know,
was ahead of the curve.
yeah, for sure. And
They did it
they
before
were
it was cool.
They did it before it was cool. Like we had a water distiller because they didn't want all the minerals that were in the tap water, and we had all kinds of crazy stuff, and it's awesome, and it was a beautiful thing. And they're still very healthy. Like my parents are in their 60s. My dad does like cycling marathons. My mom's a yoga teacher.
Wow.
They're like 35 in their bodies, and there's a reason for that. It's not an accident. So I admire them greatly, and I'm doing my best to fit into that mold within the kind of weird career lifestyle thing, which maybe this is a good segue into that. But
For that,
it's
yeah.
it's definitely something I've had to adapt as a itinerant nomad. Um, but I'm still able to stick to the principles of what I want to be eating.
Yeah.
The
This
actual
is
menu
one of,
changes.
yeah, this is, and thank you. It just before we move into that, yeah, just to finish off that what we were just talking about, what you're describing to me, the sort of, it's not extreme, but sort of unusual
Mm.
lifestyle growing up with food, atypical, let's call it. When you started describing that to me, when we first met, started working together, I remember thinking, oh gosh, that seems really extreme. I wonder what this has led Wally into. Like, I wonder what Wally's relationship with food is now. I think I maybe assumed it might be a bit strange. You might have a strange relationship with food, but I learned very quickly you didn't. We went to that wonderful burger place for dinner. Um,
Oh, in Edinburgh.
in,
Oh no,
in
Glasgow. In
in
Glasgow.
Glasgow, yeah, yeah, the one near Sydney's house.
Bread meets bread, right?
Bread meets bread. That's the one.
Yeah.
I saw you. I was like, what is Wally gonna eat in bread meets bread? I was like really curious, and then I saw you chowing down on some poutine like nobody's business.
I mean, I'm
You had
paying.
that amazing poutine there.
I slammed that veggie burger too. It was
Oh
so
yeah,
good.
yeah. It was
It's
real good.
it's the Beyond Meat brand, which I find of the veggie burgers I've tried, to me is the best one. And they did it with like real cheddar and a pickle and no weird condiments. I loved it. I was really happy with that.
Yeah, and it was just it was really a perfect example of someone having just a really healthy. If something delicious is put in front of you that you want, you don't have to
Yes.
fear it. You eat it, you enjoy it.
No, I'm really not that strict with myself. Like I have my inner kind of compass of what I'm interested in, and what I feel like my body wants.
Yeah.
I really do believe that I'm a machine that runs off fuel, and the quality of the fuel determines how well my machine functions. And so if I have a day where I eat half a tub of ice cream, I do it knowing what that's going to do to me, my immune system, my energy level. Like it's very rare that that would happen, but I'm conscious of it, and we'll call it a food holiday. But mostly, I I kind of approach it like I want to be I want to enjoy eating, but I want to be nourished, and I want to get all the calories I need, but be like fill up my fuel tank in a good way.
That to me that sounds perfect, and like I think that sounds like a really healthy approach, and that's actually what I try to instill in people I work with. But you were talking about this idea of principles rather than rules,
Yeah.
and I think that is really important in it, to be able to relate with food in a very positive way. It's this thing of like, if I eat this, it's going to make me feel like this, and so you then start to crave that feeling of feeling well, of feeling healthy, of feeling energized, of feeling strong, whatever, rather than craving that sort of very temporary endorphin and mouthfeel rush you get from eating stuff that will 10 minutes later make you feel like crap.
Right.
And I think that's a really, unfortunately in my field, in nutritional science, there's this expectation that what will happen is you go see a nutritionist and say, you can't eat this, you can't eat this, you can't eat this, you can't eat this. It's completely the opposite. It's
Right.
my job is to sort of open someone's world to like all these foods that are going to make them feel better, and that's ultimately like the best way of moving forward, you know, on these principles of, you know, try and eat fresh, non-processed food, you know, eat a lot of vegetables, don't eat to excess, you know, these sort of basic principles that if you get them down, you have to worry a lot less about like whether it's gluten free or not. Do you know what I mean?
I know. I was just thinking of an example of like being now here in France. I would have no qualms about passing a bakery and going, you know what? I'm going to get myself a primo high quality fresh croissant and just eat that. Not
Yeah.
like 10 times a day, but I wouldn't ever, you know, go through like a Sainsbury's and grab like a processed packaged pastry, you know.
Or you could buy like a pack of 4 croissants.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
to me it's sort of like quality and freshness plays a role as well. You know, with my even with my treats, like what I would say is a treat for me, it has to be like a good quality treat. I'm not interested in it if it's kind of if it comes from that like plastic world of like preservatives and um, you know, palm oil and all that weird stuff. Like if it's a fresh butter croissant from like Nanette next door who makes them every morning, no problem. I would never give myself you know, any kind of hesitation with that. But yeah, again though, I wouldn't eat that many croissants like in a week because I'd start to feel kind of like heavy and like
Of course. I mean, with any food, the poison is in the dose. I mean, same as with alcohol, or you know, I recommend my clients drink a glass of wine with dinner.
yeah,
But if it's 4 glasses of wine, it stops being very beneficial. You know.
right. Yeah, that's the other thing. I really don't drink much, and it's probably to do with singing too. But I've never been drawn to it. Even when I don't have a show or I can drink, you know, for whatever reason, I've just felt like maybe two or three and then I'm done.
And
And,
so
you know, one.
how do you think your diet directly relates? You know, without you know sucking up to you too much. You know, you have had this incredible career at such a
Right.
young age, which is you know it's amazing. I mean, how do you think your diet? Why is that funny? Are you
No,
embarrassed?
I said RIP.
Yeah. No, no, come on. Positive, positive. Um, how do you think your diet relates to your back in the day? Think of that
In
wonderful world of 6 months ago. How do you think your diet does relate to your performance career and your singing?
um, I've noticed some specific things. Because I'm vegetarian, I do have to be conscious of caloric intake sometimes because, you know, a steak has more staying power than an apple and some crackers for sure.
Well,
So
you mean you're likely to under consume calories.
yes, and what I find is I'm a very high intensity performer. I have a lot of energy, and I throw myself into my shows. So I'm burning a lot of calories, both mentally and physically. And if I don't consciously think about like taking an extra vegetarian calories on the day that I'm doing a show or a big rehearsal, I'll get drained. Um, I have a high metabolism as well, I think. So I have to bring a lot of snacks with me when I go to the theater. Sometimes even, you know, ferret them away on the side of the stage when I know I've got like a 5 minute break.
I
It's
didn't
for
notice
real.
that during Breaking the Waves.
Oh, I definitely had snacks in the changing booth. Like, you know,
Really?
rice cakes and
You could have hid them, you know, in my hospital bed.
I could have,
For this opera that Wally and I did together, I spent a large portion of the piece disabled, lying in a hospital bed, basically unable to move.
and I was the nurse. So,
Yeah, and we had various interactions in the second half of the piece like this. Yeah, you could have you know snuck a little couple of cashews under the pillow, or
yeah, on my medical tray, I could have definitely, but alas, I did not think of that at the time. But I always have snacks kind of around around the stage and in the dressing room area because I get really hungry.
So can we talk? I'd love to talk specifics with you about what you eat. I guess maybe I can guide you through it, but I'd love to know ultimately like what you tend to eat on a show day. Do you have any habits? Then particularly pre-performance, like I don't know, your whatever you eat in the meal before a performance. I'd love to know what you tend to go for. I'd love to know. I'd love to hear specifically about these snacks during.
Yeah.
Then I like to talk about what you might eat after a show. So let's talk about on the day of a show. Like what do you do?
I usually sleep in unless it's a matinee. So I guess I kind of miss like the standard breakfast window. I usually end up having my first meal like late morning, maybe between 11 and 1. Um, so it would probably be something like this, you know. Um, I don't think I would do a whole lot differently on a show day in terms of what I'm eating. I'm lucky, I guess, in that my voice is pretty all weather and it doesn't get affected by like I know some people like can't eat apples because it makes them phlegmy or whatever or cheese or something, but I've never had any specific foods cause issues with my voice or whatever. So I just sort of eat what I feel like, but I make sure that I have a good amount of food for each meal. And then I'd probably have something else, like assuming that the show's at 7:30 and we have to be at the theater at maybe 6, I'd eat a meal at maybe 4:30 or 5.
So quite
Um,
early, is that because what you don't want to be full of food when you?
yeah, yeah, I think I have a pretty small stomach size. Like I'm not a huge person. I have a small rib cage and torso, and I get full a little easily. So
Yeah.
I would I would eat generally smaller meals more often, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, yeah, so the 12, let's say the 12 o'clock meal would be, par exemple, avocado and eggs on toast, maybe like two big ones.
Yeah.
Then 4 or 5, I'd have, if I can cook, if I'm in a situation where I have a kitchen, like a big pasta dish
Mm.
um, with salad, because I like to get a lot of enzymes in me. And then I'd bring to the theater and anything from like cut up veggies, fruit, rice cakes. I really like peanut butter. I love peanut butter, so I put that on everything, like on apples or on celery. I really like celery with peanut butter in it. Do you know what ants on a log are?
I do know what ants on a log are. Yeah, yeah. So it's like celery with peanut butter in the middle, and then like some raisins.
I would usually use chocolate chips because I just sort of hate raisins. I don't know why. There's
Okay.
no good reason for it. There's no
Okay.
good reason for it. But I I hate them. So on a show day, I would let myself have chocolate chips for the extra like energy boost, but just like 3 or 4, a couple of ants. That's a fun snack. I guess things that keep like so probably not perishable stuff would be ideal.
Because there's one thing that when I work with performers directly, you know,
Nuts, like a lot of nuts.
yeah, things like nuts and obviously when you go to the theater, there's a huge practicality element that kicks in. Um, particularly someone like yourself, I've seen many fantastic production photos of you in like glamorous costumes, and you might have to get to the theater 3 hours early to get into the corset or whatever.
Oh
So
no, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Sometimes that happens. And in which case, if I did have to be there that early, I'd bring my second meal with me and I'd eat it. I'd eat it like roughly 2 hours before the show. Usually, what happens is you have like a hair and makeup call first. If you have it 3 hours before, and then you have a break, an hour or two, or an hour and a half before you have to think about getting into the costume. So I would eat my like pre-show meal in that window after having my hair and makeup done. I would just say like, let's not do the lipstick, and I'll eat my like thing, and then they'll do that right before I go on stage.
and
So that
what
happens.
might that meal look like? Are you talking about the things like the ants on a log and rice cakes, or are you talking about an actual sit down meal?
That would be like in the pasta and salad thing.
Yep.
Like if I don't have to be there so early, I would eat it at home first and then go to the theater. But if I do have a really early call, which sometimes, like for example, last fall, I think I did Cenerentola in Seattle, and I think I did have a call maybe 3 hours before because it was very glam and there were a lot of um, different people to be done. And so I was first. So I just got it out of the way. I brought my dinner with me and ate it in my dressing room.
Okay.
And it was the same meal. It would just be at the theater instead of at home.
So obviously you're a vegetarian who consumes dairy products. I just want to know, do you have a particular relationship between dairy consumption and the voice? Do you get phlegmy and all these things that we hear? Or
I don't. I don't. But I know that a lot of people do, and that's totally valid. I'm just lucky, I guess, that there's not much that will affect my voice unless it's eaten right before singing. As long as I give myself a little bit of time in between, it doesn't really matter what I eat.
okay, I am just for everyone listening. I wrote an article about this and actually made a video about it. What we actually know scientifically about the relationship between dairy and the voice. So you can find that on my website. But actually, it it doesn't surprise. This is something I learned actually since doing my master's degree in nutritional science. The evidence relating dairy to like phlegminess is actually pretty sketchy. There's not a huge amount of evidence to suggest that it sort of causes excess mucus production. There is an issue to do with the fact that milk, particularly, is an emulsion. There's like fat droplets suspended in water, in a liquid, that can sort of leave a viscous sort of feeling in the throat, but it doesn't actually, consumption of milk and dairy products doesn't actually produce phlegm in the body, which I think surprises. It's such an ingrained belief in singing.
Cause and effect.
Yeah.
And even I sort of believed that that was a thing that happened. I just assumed that I was one of the lucky ones.
Yeah. I mean, look, I have no desire to like make people eat dairy. I always say, like, I'm not trying to sell people anything. I'm not trying to sell you a cow, or, I don't have huge investments in Cravendale stocks or anything like that. But for me, it's all about getting to the truth of things. And I think, particularly the singing world, I work with a lot of voice actors as well at the Voice Care Centre in London. And there are just so many kind of myths and half-truths regarding nutrition and the voice, like what you can and can't do, what you can and can't eat. And you know what? I want to create a world where singers have as little neurosis as possible.
Me too.
Right?
That's
Right?
so lucky. I feel like a walking poster child for like letting go of your neuroses.
Yeah. And you're a good representative. You're a good example of that.
I can tell you from experience that, well, I've never eaten meat, but everything else, you should be good to go with the singing. As long as you give yourself like a little bit of time to digest and have a sip of water, you're fine.
Yeah.
I think like eating, proximity to singing is far more of a factor than what you eat. Like if you have a big meal 10 minutes before going on stage, like for sure that's going to be a problem because that's where you're supporting, and you're going to probably get reflux and discomfort and heartburn. But if you're eating 2 or 3 hours in advance and then just having little snacks like a bite of an apple or something as you go through the night, how could it really be a problem, you know?
That is a fantastic message. I might put that into quotes.
Go for it.
So when you eat is perhaps more significant than what you eat.
I think so.
I think that's really good advice. Hey, and can I just quickly ask, since we were on that wonderful track, what about after a show? Do you ever think about post-performance nutrition at all?
I don't know if it counts as nutrition, but I'm usually just starving after a show. I mean, you might remember from Adelaide, every night I wanted to go out for food. People were like, "Let's go get drinks. Let's go to the pub." And I was like, "Do they serve food until midnight?"
Yeah, yeah.
Like, is the kitchen still open? No? Okay, I'm going back to the
No.
hotel. I think it's like also related to the high metabolism thing and the fact that I'm not maybe eating earlier, like because I eat at 5 for the show. By the time 10 or 10:30 rolls around, I'm starving. So I am guilty of after a show, and only after a show, eating a big late night meal.
I actually, I would like to encourage a culture of singers eating food after they perform. I think from my now anecdotal experience and the research I've done, I think we underestimate how physiologically and, neurologically draining a performance can be.
Yeah.
And when I work with clients, actually particularly musical theatre clients, because they're also often dancing and
Dancing, yeah, burning so
but,
many calories.
but to be honest, opera singers too. We it's a draining experience. You know, I mean, the last opera, yeah, exactly. And I think we underestimate how taxing it is in our body. And if we start to think more like athletes, like you'd never hear of LeBron James. Sorry, I've been watching the NBA playoffs from the bubble, so I'm so into basketball at the moment. LeBron James, Usain Bolt, whatever, you know, some amazing athlete. You'd never think of them doing a race and then not giving their body the recovery meal. It would be unheard of. Any athlete of any level, even a weekend warrior, you know, half marathoner, they
Totally.
they would never go for a run and then not think about their post-run nutrition. And yet, what I see with singers, you know, people get to the theater at 5, you know, jump up and down with adrenaline, warm up, you know, do all their stuff. The show's at 7, it finishes at 11. It's this huge experience.
Mm.
And then I won't lie, particularly British singers, what do? We go get drunk after.
I can't do it. I don't know how y'all do it. I experienced that a lot over the past few years, starting to work more regularly in the UK from 2017 onward, and it blows my mind
Yeah.
um, because you or they, I don't want to lump you in with them, but they drink without eating. So they go straight from the show to the pub and get the alcohol in them, but they don't have a meal first to sort of take the edge off it, or even like at any point. And I would never, I'll have a bender once or twice a year where I drink a lot, but I always eat with it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
my body can't handle that much alcohol with no food in it, especially when you're already depleted. Yeah, it blows my mind. Culturally, I don't know how it's sustainable.
It's incredible. Yeah. And well, I would argue that it's not. And there is, I don't want to say without sounding like I'm being cruel, because I've been guilty of it myself. I'm not, like, I think I should be lumped in with that. I don't do it so much anymore, but certainly when I was younger. I guess my advice, if you're an up and coming singer, is to consider what your body needs to recover from that performance you just did. And yeah, fine. When you're 26, 27, 28, you probably won't notice a difference. But if you do it for 10 years,
Yeah.
it will take a toll on your body. And there is a drop-off rate of singers.
Yes,
And
I've noticed.
I wonder if this is part of the reason. Um, there's a sort of sense of invincibility until you're no longer invincible. And then,
When you're as old as we are, even
yeah,
then.
the wise old sages.
Yeah.
So
God, yeah, for sure.
I wanted to end, and that's a sort of segue into what I wanted to end with. Is that would be sort of my advice, my nutritional advice. If I could give one piece of advice to a young singer right now, I would probably say consider your post-performance nutrition,
Mm.
particularly as it relates to hydration. Make sure you drink some water
Oh yeah.
before you down, 4 pints of beer.
Oh yeah.
Um, might be a little bit hard to answer, so I don't want to put you on the spot. But um, what advice might you give to a young singer in this field, in terms of like eating, drinking, or perhaps what advice would you give your younger self, like maybe something you've learned along the way?
Definitely to eat more. Um, when I was younger, I hadn't figured out yet that just how draining a show would be and how many calories I would burn. I had no awareness of that. I was still eating well at that time, pretty much the same as now. But I I had a little bit more influence from these myths of, don't eat while you're singing because it'll make you phlegmy, and you have to make sure that you leave like lots of space before the meal, um, and I wouldn't snack during a show either because I would think that that would mess up my voice and stuff. And I think at a certain point, actually, I remember what it was. I was vegan for 3 years in my 20s and naturally just lost weight. I wasn't trying to, but it's harder to keep calories on when you're vegan. And at one point, one of my directors sort of said, like, "Are you okay? Because you were very thin and you seem all right, but we're a little bit worried about you."
Wow.
And I hadn't even thought of it, but I was like, "Oh, you know what? Maybe you're right." And it was mainly because, like, when you're on stage, you end up looking thinner than you are. The opposite of when you're on camera. The
Oh,
camera
really?
Yes, when you're on stage, it's to do with the lighting, the distance, and usually perspective. People appear to be slimmer than they would up close.
Huh.
So if you're already erring on the side of a little bit too thin, you can come across as somewhat skeletal. And I think that's what was happening. I've always been thin. I've always been really active. Like, I'm a cyclist. I don't have a car, and I've always been vegetarian. And then when I was vegan on top of it, I think I lost like 10 pounds right away. Um, and I also noticed with my singing, I just didn't have as much gas in the tank. And I was doing big roles like, Cenerentola and like full title role, long nights on the stage. And I'd make it through, but I'd be absolutely exhausted. And I learned through, I guess, getting it wrong that I really needed to eat more and just fill up my tank, and figured it out eventually. But I definitely spent probably the bulk of my 20s not eating enough food as in relation to performing. Like, day to day, I was fine, but whenever I had something kind of taxing to do, I was not meeting my caloric output.
Huh. Wally, this is I love this message. It's so food positive, this message. And I think hearing that from you is going to be really beneficial to a lot of, I hate to use the word, we're not old, but earlier generation singers, shall we say. People in
Yeah.
their 20s. I gave a lecture at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama on this topic. We talked about hydration, reflux, weight management, all kind of stuff. And a real common thread that was highlighted in that lecture, and something that I experience with clients anecdotally as well, is particularly young women fearing, maybe that's the wrong word, but I'll use it anyway,
Yeah.
fearing calories,
Oh,
not
we're
recognizing,
fine.
yeah, not recognizing how demanding the job is, and particularly a performance, but just singing in general, and just being a human requires calories, and they're not something to be feared, or they're not something to be mitigated. You shouldn't. Fewer calories isn't a good thing necessarily.
Oh, not in every case. Sometimes it means that your body starts storing fat, right?
Indeed, indeed, and I think if if I were to give advice to younger women, it would be, don't fear food. You need it. It's good for you. It's just about picking the right, the right things, and you'll end up having a wonderful career like Wally Giunta.
Well,
Hey, Wally, thanks so much. I'm so happy to have had this chat with you, and I think I'm so happy to share it with people, because I think the message you even, I don't know, if even without realizing it, the message that you send out with regards to your food is that you love it, that
hmm
you utilize the benefit of food to fuel your life, to fuel your career, to fuel your enjoyment of life, and that's awesome. Um, and I think that's something that we could encourage in everyone.
I'm so
Um,
glad to hear that. I mean, I've always had like a lot of colleagues come up to me and be like, "Why are you just eating a yellow pepper?" And I'll go, "Because it's amazing,"
because I love it.
And They think I'm crazy, and then I eat like a 3 course meal after a show, and everyone's drinking beer, and I'm just super pleased with myself, and I don't care what anyone else thinks. But I'm definitely usually not the norm in whatever situation I'm in. The way that I eat and approach eating is usually not the norm, but it's working for me.
But
So
look, let's, not to end on a negative note, but the norm is showing to not be effective, yeah, on a population level. And um, I think we need to look a little bit outside what's called the current eating culture, um, to find what's optimal. And I think you've certainly found what works for you.
yes, for sure. And my parents, I have to thank for that. I can send you their phone numbers if anybody wants to talk to them about great examples. They're great role models for me.
Yeah. Hey, Wally, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. It's so good to see you.
You
And
too.
it's so nice to hear your perspective on all this. And I'm definitely going to, if it's okay with you, I'm definitely going to use you as an example at my next in my next lectures, because I think.
Okay. Whatever you like.
Thank you. Hey, all the best. Did you manage to finish your breakfast, or did I get you talking too much?
I ate half of it,
Oh,
but
I'm sorry. It's gonna be all cold now.
it's fine. It's one of those meals that's just as good cold.
All right, Wally. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Okay.
All right, take care.